Access to Democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Thomson Reuters, the Answer Company. The Division Championship Minnesota Twins are looking to go all the way to the World Series in 2024. Bolstered by inspirational shortstop Carlos Correa, a healthy Brian Buxton, and rookie phenom Royce Lewis, plus a pitching staff led by Pablo Lopez and an outstanding bullpen featuring Johan Duran, the Twins are the best bargain in the major leagues, and Target Field is the best venue in baseball. Sheridan Dulas & Kins, PA, a family and criminal defense law firm, has been serving clients in Dakota County and throughout Minnesota for over 40 years. Ranked a Tier 1 Best Law Firm by U.S. News and World Report every year since 2009, Sheridan Dulas & Kins are here to help you in your most difficult life circumstances. Established in 2007, 45th Parallel Spirits was among the first 50 micro-distilleries in the United States. Based in New Richmond, Wisconsin, all aspects of production occur at our facility. If you're interested in visiting and learning more about the 45th Parallel Distillery, please check our website and plan a visit to tour our facility and taste our spirits. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org.
Welcome to Access to Democracy. Alan Miller with you, and a longtime guest, a favorite guest, Steve Hunegs of the Jewish Community Relations Council. He is a legend in his own mind and in all our minds also. He's been decades with the JCRC, and he's built it into a really powerhouse of ethics for not only Minnesota, but the Dakotas. Welcome back, Steve.
Thank you, Alan. It's a great pleasure to be here with Sharon and Mary and everybody who all these years has helped you run your marvelous program. So many important and outstanding figures in our community have appeared because they know they want to answer your questions and engage in civic-minded dialogue. So I thank you for the huge contribution you've made to our society.
Well, I thank you. We just had our 25th anniversary a few months ago, and some people were very kind.
Well, that's a quarter century of great accomplishment, and you just told me, I hope I'm not betraying a state secret, that you've turned 91. We say in Latin, Yiddish actually, Kenahora.
So thank you. Thank you. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk about today, and I know certainly you do, is burgeoning anti-Semitism, not only in this country, where we had almost 1,900 reported incidents in 23-24, but around the world, where there's been like 300% increase in anti-Semitism. And, you know, having lived through World War II, I can't believe what is going on in our universities, what is going on in the streets, etc. And I think a lot of it is because people can't differentiate between Israel, Zionism, and Jewishness, Judaism. So I'd like to hear your thoughts about that.
And that sounds like the answer to a master's level thesis or something like that, but I'll do my best with a very profoundly important question. Let's start with some statistics, Alan. ADL, their latest global survey of anti-Semitism, 46% of the world's population has anti-Semitic attitudes. FBI for the year 2023, the year of October 7, 2023. Of course, we pray for the return of the hostages, demand the return of the hostages. A 63% increase. A survey on college campus found that 84% of Jewish students had experienced anti-Semitism since October 7, 2023. And then the ADL, back to the ADL statistics, 360% increase year over year since 2023, all to your point. About what you would say the congruency between people's inability to distinguish between Judaism, Israel, Zionism, and the like. Certainly that has been a fulcrum of anti-Semitism since October 7th. Not necessarily that we should distinguish between them because, after all, Zionism is the national liberation movement of the Jewish people, asking only that for which all countries would like, and that is the ability to determine their own fate.
I just can't imagine after World War II that anti-Semitism would really rear its head again. I mean, I experienced several events in my lifetime in terms of, being singled out because I was Jewish, or kids who were somewhat not only ignorant, but really prejudiced. But for instance, what's going on now, and I know you and I have differing opinions about Israel. Well, I spent Desert Storm in Israel because I felt so strongly of the need for a Jewish state. I was there as a correspondent, not as a combatant. But what has happened to Israel now, you couldn't get me to go back over there because of what has happened. I am a two-state solution person, and really what has happened in Gaza and the West Bank is just unpalatable to me.
Well, let's go back to the first piece of your question, and that is anti-Semitism. You were born in 1934, so in a way, anti-Semitism since 1934. My dad was born in 1931, so your lives are congruent. He just celebrated his 94th birthday. Bless his soul. But take the horseshoe theory, and that is the idea that where the hatred of the left, far left, hatred of the far right converge is at Jews, Judaism, you name it. Look at the state of Pennsylvania, for example. You go back to 2018 and the murderous attack on the Eitz Chaim congregation by a person of extreme right who had heard that they were hosting an event for the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. That is a Jewish organization dedicated to helping immigrants throughout the world. Last week...
Keep your voice up.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Last week, the attack on Governor Shapiro in his household
one of my notes,
from a person from the left. What does that point out? Just using Pennsylvania as an example, where the hatred comes about. Yeah, you and I have had a lot of talks on Israel over the years, and you can read the Israeli press every day to see intense criticism of Prime Minister.
And I do.
Netanyahu. Nevertheless, it is a project of the Jewish people for which we must retain great pride given to all of its accomplishments of the world. We hope that, depending upon your perspective, elections are coming up, and that the people in Israel who make the decisions about the fate of the state of Israel, we all see it as a Rorschach test. We all want certain results. Nevertheless, we don't live there. We don't serve in the military, and it's up to the people of Israel to decide their fate.
There's
Nevertheless,
no question about that.
We can't divorce ourselves, no matter what the outcome is, from the fate of the Jewish people and Israel, because we've seen what Israel has done for Jews and people throughout the world in any number of different ways. Do many of us wish that there was a two-state solution? That's the official position of our organization. Yes, I join you in that desire. Do many people wish that Israel treated Palestinians at all times in a better way? Yes, whenever possible. Stay tuned, because actually...
And people also have to realize that Hezbollah and Hamas and some of the neighboring states really want Israel to disappear. And the Israelis at all times live with that.
Indeed. This is unusual because you and I like to talk about political philosophers whom we've shared over the years and had wonderful conversations. But somebody named John Linden, that is Sid Vicious of the Sex Pistols, actually gave an interview which nailed it right on the head. He's not Jewish, but he said in this recent interview, what is Hamas? Jew exterminators. That's precisely what they are, as is Hezbollah, right? The world will not miss Nasrallah nor Sinwar. But that's a different story from trying to find ways for all peoples to live together in the Middle
Absolutely.
East. Right?
You know, we just had Passover, which is really a time of peace, and some of the scriptures, not scriptures, but some of the whatever.
What we read in the Haggadah, what we read at the Seder, right?
And, you know, you look at that, you look at the history of the Jewish people, you look at Israel, and I was ecstatic when the state of Israel was formed in 48. Thanks much to President Truman. But, you know, I always felt that now the Jewish people have a home. But the prejudice that has covered the Jewish people and been rampant, I don't understand. Well, you know, the Irish, if something goes wrong, they don't connect them, the American Irish, to Ireland. But in this country, if you're Jewish, automatically you're connected to Israel. And that's manifestly unfair, but that's the way it is.
Well, throughout the world, going back to that ADL statistic of 46% of the people having anti-Semitic attitudes, there's any number of reasons for it, but yes, the confounding of Jews with Israel, even though, of course, most Jews, 60, 70, 80% in this country, feel very strongly attached to Israel, is an issue. I want to talk about something on the good news front. Can we do that?
Good.
But it starts with a sad note, and we all extend our condolences to our Catholic friends on the passing of Pope Francis, right?
Who was really a good man.
A good and decent man.
Progressive Pope.
That's right.
And I only hope that the Church makes as wide a selection.
Well, you and I will stick to Jewish topics today.
Okay.
Our Catholic friends will debate the progress, that the direction in which the Church will go. But I'll note the following, that this is the 60th anniversary of the Nostra Aetate. The Nostra Aetate, was the papal declaration which reset theologically relations between Catholics and Jews. Primarily, significantly in North America, it has resulted in the upward trajectory of Jewish-Catholic relations. And, you know, for a minute, let's just review what those important points were of the Nostra Aetate. One, that Jews were not collectively responsible for the death of Jesus. Two, that anti-Semitism is a sin against God. And three, that parallel, or despite, you might say, the the Christian belief in the resurrection of Jesus and the divinity of Jesus, that does not abrogate in the Jewish covenantal relationship with God. Those are a huge step forwards, and they continue to be a huge step forward. And Pope Francis, like Pope Benedict, like Pope John Paul II, has been keenly devoted to the principles and exercising and putting into action those principles. You know, I say all this.
Much of which falls on deaf ears, unfortunately.
But some of which also, you know, I know in my relations with our Catholic friends, whom we consider our brothers and sisters in faith, as Pope John Paul II said, has resulted in great progress. I hold up this book because the Pope's great friend was Rabbi Skorka from Buenos Aires. And I'm pleased to say, you'll hear more about this, that in our own community, I'm talking about Jews and Catholics and all Christians in the Twin Cities, Rabbi Skorka is going to be our speaker at our commemorative celebratory dinner for the 60th anniversary of the Nostra Aetate. So that's a good thing, right?
That's a great thing.
That's a great thing. We got to keep that in mind in these days, okay?
And then we step back to picking up the paper yesterday and reading that the faculty and employees of Barnard College were asked to sign a paper if they were Jewish and if they had anything to say. And one of the members of the faculty said something to the effect that, my God, the next thing they'll be doing is having us wear yellow stars. I mean, again, it's a step by the current administration that I think is untoward and unnecessary and really covers what they say. They're trying to stop anti-Semitism on campus, but I think that's a false flag. I concern myself with it a lot. I think it's a MacGuffin.
It's not a false flag and it's not a MacGuffin because, as we saw at the University of Minnesota and many other places, especially in the aftermath of 2023 and the conduct of, we're not talking about speech necessarily, we're talking about conduct on campuses, intimidating Jewish students. At the university, you saw vandalism at university campuses. At the University of Minnesota, things like Long Live the Intifada, Glory to the Alaska flood.
And I believe these students really don't understand.
Well, that may be true, but plenty of them understanding, having gone and watched the rallies at times, there was a sense of great hatred on campus towards Israel, towards Jews. The interruption of the CLA graduation last year, the shooting out of the windows at Hillel at the University of Minnesota.
There's no way to condone violence.
Yeah, there's a lot of serious issues, many of which were not addressed particularly well by the university. Now, however, and this is a good thing, President Cunningham has entered into Hillel's Campus Climate Initiative, which is really important. She's affirmed she will follow the rules of the university. She's met with many groups on campuses, a significant amount of time with the Jewish community, Chabad, Hillel, other organizations, and she's firmly committed to a better Jewish future at the University of Minnesota, which is all for the good. These are things that we should celebrate. Back to the Trump administration, what wasn't necessarily misbegotten was an aggressive stance towards anti-Semitism on campus, particularly when the college campuses, universities, and administrators weren't doing their job. Now, as the American Jewish Committee representative Ted Deutsch would say, A, issues of anti-Semitism stand on their own at the university. They should not be commingled with other issues in the universities. B,
and they're below the surface.
Yeah.
A lot of people have it below. Haley Joel Osment, the actor,
yeah,
who was just arrested last week. He has a couple of drunkenness arrests. But what did he do? He attacked the police officers anti-Semitically as Jews and things like, what he said to them and what he said about Jews. It's below the surface in so many people that it really is disturbing to me.
yeah. Let's just go back to your point. We were talking about, before we got on camera, about democracy, right? And from democracy, you can distill or discern the importance of the three branches of government too, because that's all part of our democratic framework in the United States. Just today, the Trump administration took a step back with respect to the international visas and international students. And why is that the case? Just look at Minnesota itself with the revocations, if you want to use that term, of visas among students in Minnesota. You had Judge Schultz, an appointee of President George W. Bush, Judge Thunheim, an appointee of President Clinton, both arrive at the same conclusion, that the administration was not properly following due process and overstepping its bounds. Okay, these are two different federal judges in Minnesota. What's my point? Our democratic framework, which includes the judiciary, which since Marbury versus Madison has this last say
1803,
on many,
who's counting?
Yeah, on many issues, has performed its role. And it's impacted the way the administration is looking at the issue of visas and international students, right? So it's easy to fall into despair in these days. But at the same time, when you see the system working as it should, at least in the eyes of these federal judges and its assessment of due process, it's important.
And then you have the president yesterday who said, well, we should deny due process to illegal immigrants. It flies in the face of the Constitution. It flies in the face of everything that we believe, because everybody in this country is entitled to due process, no matter who they are. It's the same as the birthright issue. the fact of the matter is, if you are born here, you are a citizen here, and you don't differentiate by nationality. This administration, and I know we weren't going to talk too much about this administration, has just tread on everything that we believe in that regard.
Well, the fundamental principles are being upheld, and you can see whether you're a Democrat or you're a Republican or whether you're an independent.
By the judiciary, but not by the administration.
No, that's my point. But people have faith in the judiciary, too. But elections have consequences. Alan, you know that. Putting aside the conduct of the administration, your perspective on it, if you're an independent person who wants the country to conduct itself in a way, or you're a Democrat, you ought to win elections, right? It's hugely critical. You really shouldn't rely upon the judiciary. The judiciary is performing its function, but it's a non-political body, right? If you want to govern this country, if you want to look at its conduct, win the elections, right? I mean, in a way, the Republicans issued its blueprint, right, for how they were going to conduct themselves.
And called 2025.
Right. So that was the roadmap, and you're seeing much of it put into place. In our own community, about 72%, the latest polling, show that people the Jewish community, are unhappy with the Trump administration on tariffs issues, on student issues, and the like. At the same time, a significant piece of our community is supportive of it, too. But you have to look at the end of the day and say it's up to the American people. We have an election coming up in 2026, congressional elections, presidential election in 2028, if they want to change the course of the country. And going back to where we started this issue, you said it's a MacGuffin. I would, with huge respect, because you're a very special person to me, that anti-Semitism on campus was far from a MacGuffin, and the steps of the administration taking to address it
I think they're more
important. Now
more interested in stepping on rights than they are about protection of the Jewish student body.
I think both can be true at the same time, in the sense that many well-meaning people in the administration thought it was important to address anti-Semitism on campus. What we have to do is make sure that the balance is correctly struck between respecting due process rights, very important in the Jewish community and all communities, and making sure our campuses are safe for people. When you have some of the hateful things that we saw at the University of Minnesota and throughout the country intimidating Jewish students, that is a bad day.
Well, there's no way to condone violence.
And I would say that generally Democratic-leaning people were not particularly serious about protecting Jewish students on campus, and it took this administration. You may argue with its motivations and/or its processes, but this took this administration to bear down on this issue, and you're seeing the results of quieter campuses these days, right? And after all, the function of a university campus is to educate its students, help its students advance in life. That should not be in derogation of people's free speech rights, but at the same time, free speech does not encompass anti-Semitic behavior, which crosses the line into violence and intimidation. You got to keep those. You got to keep all those principles.
We have to talk about.
We got to keep all those principles in mind, right?
You have the right to say whatever you say, but you don't have the right to take that and implement it into action.
Take this statement at Kaufman Memorial Union, which is really the center of the University of Minnesota campus, that was painted on its walls, that said, "Glory to the Alaska flood." What is the Alaska flood? October 7. What is October 7? Mass murder and rape, right? And so that act of vandalism, of course, is illegal in and of itself, but the conduct and not calling it out is also a dangerous step, too. So,
and that was an opportunity right there for the Jewish community, for Israel, to have the sympathy of the world, and yet the reaction of the Netanyahu government just destroyed that with overreaction and the destruction and the horrible count of death that's resulted from it.
All innocent civilian life we should mourn, particularly Palestinian, Jewish, Israeli, Arab, whatever the case may be. But Alan, you can't be naive either. I mean, the goal of Hamas is to lure Israel into this type of conflict in which they secrete their their terrorists, their supplies into civilian areas.
Hamas, Hezbollah,
yeah,
the Houthis.
right. So everything we say has to be balanced, right? And you're correctly so bemoaning the loss of life, and we all should, and all innocent life. But there's a significant amount of terrorists killed in Gaza, like Sinwar, and B, Hamas using its own people as shields and hostages, right? Not to mention the the Israeli hostages now held over 550 days.
And there was a terrible intelligence lapse on the part of Israel as these people were digging tunnels with money that was meant to feed them.
Can't argue with that. I mean, there's much for the Netanyahu prime ministership to account for, right? I mean, that's why people have called for an independent commission, just like after the 73 war. Why was Israel caught by surprise by Syria and Egypt in 1973?
Right.
The thing you say about Israel is they tend to learn from their mistakes, right? And they did after the 73 war, too.
In any event, it's always an education to talk to you.
Well, you're one of my heroes in life because you talk about democracy, you name your program Access to Democracy, and all the wonderful guests and speakers that you've had on the show, you've advanced along with Sharon and Mary and everybody else who's part of your program, the cause of democracy by having civil, engaged conversation on issues in which people have differences of opinion. That's the hallmark of democracy, Alan, and you're a champion of it.
And certainly the Jewish really community council and you are really the emphasis and really the inspiration for sanity in this. Now, I want to say really farewell. Farewell to Access to Democracy. I've had a tough few months physically, and it's interesting. The intellect remains, but the body gave out. And so I've made the very tough decision that this will be my last interview, and I'm glad it's with you, on Access to Democracy. Except on very special occasions and not as a regular. You know, we started with an interview of a legislator by the name of Palenti, and it was to be a one-timer. We have grown from that to 35 cities in our network. We're on YouTube. We have our own website. So many good things have happened, and we tried to bring divergent viewpoints. I've had really some of the best shows that I have done arguing with former Congressman John Klein, former Mayor Pat Anderson, etc. And they were like inspirations, and they were also an opportunity to spread both our beliefs. And, you know, mine certainly to the left. Theirs not so much so. But I had hoped that, you know, this program would bring to people an opportunity to have dialogue rather than 10-second or 20-second sound bites. And I think that's what it's done. And I'm leaving it in really good hands. Steve Francisco, Bill Raker, they are terrific interviewers. Sharon, who has been with me really all through this. Mary, who's been our director for decades. And we're in good hands with the city of Eagan, this facility which we get to use, the high school. Haley, Josh, and Kevin. I would be remiss if I didn't mention Avi, who has been our webmaster, but he's been a lot more. He's also been someone who really, really has given his all. So we've made a lot of friends. We've met a lot of people. It's been a wonderful career in terms of my aspect, looking back at it. And as we say, thank you to you, Steve Hunegs. We're going to say thank you to all our viewers, at least from me, for access to democracy.
Do I have an extra minute here so I can?
We can do it.
Thank you. First of all, on behalf of a grateful nation, as they say, grateful region, grateful community, thank you and the entire team for all that you've done to strengthen democracy here and far beyond, because who knows how far your words go and the conversations you've had your guests, that has impact. It makes me think, first of all, what do we say in Yiddish? You should live to 120, first and foremost, right? But it also brings me back to July 4, 1826, when Presidents Jefferson and Adams died on the same day, right? And they had such great philosophical, not quite generational, but philosophical differences about the United States. Nevertheless, this country would not be what it is with all its glories and all its faults without disparate views. And towards the end of their lives, they certainly tried to reconcile, because for many years they didn't speak, right? So I think of what it meant in this country to have honorable civic debate against the profound issues of our time and sort of live that legacy of Jefferson and Adams, right? What you did for public access.
We're destroying the time that we're allotted, but I want to thank you, and I would be remiss if I didn't give a special shout out to Sharon, who has endured so much and stood with me and stood with this program all these years. And a special thanks to you, Steve.
A shake of the hand.